You find out you're pregnant today with a plastic stick and 2 blue lines, and within days you can see the whole 9 months mapped out for you. Appointments, ultrasounds, a hospital bed waiting at the end of it. For most of human history, none of that existed. A woman knew she was pregnant because her body told her, slowly, and everything that happened next depended entirely on the people around her. Pregnancy is one of the most dangerous things a human body can do, and it has been that way for as long as our species has existed. So let's talk about what that actually meant for hundreds of thousands of years before any of it was made safe. Start with the body itself. Human birth is uniquely difficult among primates, and the reason comes down to a trade-off written into our evolution. Walking upright narrowed the pelvis for efficient two-legged movement. At the same time, our brains kept getting bigger, which meant babies needed larger skulls to fit them. Those two pressures collided, and the result is what anthropologists call the obstetric dilemma. Human babies are born earlier and more helpless than almost any other primate, and human birth itself is harder and riskier than it is for our closest relatives. A chimpanzee gives birth alone, quickly, and is usually walking again within the hour. A human, for most of our history, often could not. This is likely why humans developed something almost no other primate relies on for birth: help. Researchers who study birth across cultures have found that assisted childbirth, someone present, supporting, guiding, is close to universal in human societies, ancient and modern. This is sometimes called the doula hypothesis, the idea that human birth became so physically demanding that natural selection favored women who sought out companionship and assistance during labor, and favored groups where that assistance was reliably given. Long before hospitals, before medicine as we'd recognize it, the presence of an experienced woman, someone who had done this before, watched it before, survived it before, was often the single biggest factor in whether both mother and child made it through. That knowledge had to live somewhere, and it lived in older women. This connects to something researchers call the grandmother hypothesis, the observation that human females are unusual among primates in living for decades after they're no longer able to have children themselves. One leading explanation is that this extended lifespan existed because grandmothers were enormously valuable, not for reproduction, but for survival. They knew which plants eased labor pain. They knew how to turn a baby positioned wrong. They knew what to do when bleeding didn't stop. That knowledge, refined and passed down across generations of women who had personally lived through it, functioned as the closest thing early humans had to medicine. Herbal knowledge around pregnancy runs deep and wide across almost every hunter-gatherer society studied by anthropologists. Certain plants were used to ease labor pain, others to help stop bleeding after birth, others believed to encourage a stalled labor forward. Much of this knowledge doesn't survive in the archaeological record directly. Plants rot, but it survives in the practices of modern indigenous communities whose traditions stretch back an unknown number of generations, offering a rare window into what earlier humans may have relied on. Birth itself likely didn't happen lying down. Cross-cultural studies of traditional societies consistently show upright birthing positions, squatting, kneeling, supported by ropes or by other women standing behind and beside the mother. Gravity helped. So did the ability to move, shift, and respond to what the body was doing, something far harder to do flat on your back. The now common image of a woman lying down for birth is a relatively recent development, tied more to the convenience of later medical examination than to what worked best for the body itself. And birth was dangerous, brutally so. Estimates drawn from skeletal remains and from studying societies without modern medicine suggest maternal mortality in prehistoric populations was likely far higher than anything most people alive today have ever witnessed, a risk that shadowed every single pregnancy. Infant mortality was devastatingly high as well. Archaeologists have found infant burials at sites across the ancient world, sometimes buried with particular care, wrapped, positioned deliberately, evidence that these losses were felt and marked, not treated as routine, even in a world where they happened constantly. Once a baby survived birth, the challenge didn't end, it changed shape. Human infants are born extraordinarily helpless compared to other animals. unable to walk, cling, or regulate their own body temperature for a long stretch after birth. This meant a mother's ability to move, forage, and travel was seriously constrained for months. Archaeologists and anthropologists studying early human groups believe this is a major reason human societies developed such intensive systems of shared childcare. Unlike most primates, where the mother alone does nearly all infant care, human groups appear to have relied heavily on what's called alloparenting. Aunts, grandmothers, older siblings, and sometimes unrelated group members all helping to carry, feed, and watch infants. A mother rarely carried the full weight of a newborn's survival alone. Practical tools emerged to solve the mobility problem directly. Cradle boards and wrapped carrying slings, found across cultures from the Arctic to the Americas, allowed a mother to keep an infant secure and close while still using her hands, still walking, still working. Some of the earliest depictions of infants in prehistoric art show them bound this way, close to the body, which tells you how central this problem was to daily survival. You could not simply set a baby down and expect to get anything else done. Diet and pregnancy were tightly connected in ways early humans clearly understood, even without knowing why. Ethnographic studies of hunter-gatherer societies show consistent patterns of food sharing that prioritized pregnant and nursing women, sometimes through explicit social rules about which cuts of meat or which foods were set aside for them. This wasn't sentiment. Groups that failed to support pregnant women adequately risked losing both mother and child, a cost too severe for any community to absorb casually. Spacing between births also appears to have been managed, deliberately, in many early societies. Extended breastfeeding, sometimes for several years, naturally suppresses fertility, and anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer groups have found this created birth intervals of roughly 3 to 4 years, spacing that made sense given how long a single child needed to be carried and cared for before a mother could realistically manage another. This wasn't calculated the way a modern calendar tracks it, but the pattern held remarkably consistently across unrelated societies on different continents, which suggests it solved a problem too important to leave to chance. So here's the picture. Pregnancy and birth were never private individual events in early human history. They were community events, supported by inherited knowledge, shared labor, and the accumulated experience of women who had lived through it themselves and made sure the next generation wouldn't have to guess. Every plant remedy tested, every birthing position refined, every grandmother who stayed up through a long labor because she'd seen one go wrong before, all of it fed into a survival system built entirely on people showing up for each other. Tonight, somewhere, a woman will find out she's pregnant and open an app instead of turning to an elder. The information is instant now, searchable, painless to access. But the questions underneath it, will this go well? Who will help me? What happens if something goes wrong? Are exactly the same questions asked around fires for hundreds of thousands of years, long before anyone had an answer beyond each other.